Hello and welcome to the launch of the 2022 to 2023 VCU-Marquette Challenge. My name is Carrie Schmitz and I'm one of the challenge coordinators for Marquette University. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We'd love to know where everyone is tuning in from, so you can go ahead and leave a comment on either Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching, and we'll get it showing up on the screen here in a little bit. I know that everyone might be busy, maybe with midterms or clinicals, so we're going to get started right away with some introductions. As I said, my name is Carrie Schmitz. Myself and Dan Bendel are from Marquette University, and we are this year's challenge coordinators. Joining us tonight is Rod Linares, representing this year's co-host school, Virginia Commonwealth University.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce our first guest of the night, Jimmy Mckay. Jimmy serves on the Board of Trustees for the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research, and you may also know him from his podcast, PT Pinecast. He also has a personal connection with the Marquette Challenge that I'm interested to hear about, so please welcome Jimmy.
Rod, thanks so much for the introduction. I appreciate that.
No problem, Jimmy.
All right. I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. First, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Seeing you guys chime in on social media is always great. We're going to learn more about the foundation in our student-led fundraiser, the Marquette Challenge. Now, the foundation is the only national nonprofit solely dedicated to advancing physical therapy through research and scholarships. Now, research makes the profession of physical therapy stronger by defining the value of physical therapy, providing data to help professionals deliver the best possible care, and developing innovative treatments and approaches. Now, listen, my background is in communications. I love stories, patient stories, clinical stories, success stories, stories of triumph. I love Toy Story, Toy Story 2. I love Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4, and, Lightyear, available now on Disney+. What was I talking about? Right, stories. Stories are great, and they tell a lot. Look at the stories as a subjective part of what our profession can communicate, but we can't forget the objective stories. That's a big part, and we need to tell those stories, and that is where research comes in. Now, since 1979, the foundation has helped kickstart the careers of more than 665 researchers through more than $20 million in funding. That is a lot. Now, because of our peer review process, it also helps better prepare these researchers for future funding applications. Our researchers have gone on to secure more than $894 million in follow-on funding. Yeah, that's some bank right there. Now, this year alone, we've funded $325,000 in scholarship and fellowship research projects. That deserves a little bling there. That'll take physical therapy to the next level, including equine-assisted therapy for children with cerebral palsy, telehealth for medically complex older veterans, and physical therapy for postpartum healing and health equity, just to name a few. In addition, Chris Lane of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill received the scholarship named in honor of the challenge for his project titled Preventing Disability After ACL Injury, Examining Opportunities in Those at Greatest Risk. Our work would not be possible without support from people like you. I also had the opportunity to engage with the Marquette Challenge back when I was a student at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia. We launched the Marymount 5K race to raise funds, and I'm happy to report that that race is still going on today. Not right now because it's nighttime, but the event continues to raise funds for the foundation. Now that you've heard why I did the challenge, I would love for you to take a shot and write in the comments below of why you're planning on participating in the challenge. We want to hear from you and your why for your commitment to telling those objective stories and subjective stories with us. Bonus points if you use an emoji or a GIF. Gotta love me some GIFs. Now, before I go, please join me in thanking the 2022-2023 VCU-Marquette Challenge title sponsor, HPSO CNA, for their generous support of the challenge and this event. I look forward to seeing all of you in May for our awards celebration. Thanks again.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. I would also like to say that I'm also a big fan of Toy Story. But tonight we are going to hear from a past recipient of a foundation research grant that is named in honor of the Marquette Challenge. But first, we would like to introduce the challenge to those of you that are new. So the Marquette Challenge is a grassroots student-led fundraising effort to advance the mission of the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. Each year, hundreds of physical therapy and physical therapy assistant students, with the support of program directors, faculty, and the community, hold events across the U.S. to raise money for the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. When students at your school participate in the challenge at all levels, they make an investment that strengthens their future profession. Every single donation, whether big or small, will make a difference. In fact, students have raised over $4.6 million through the challenge, and the Marquette Challenge itself is the largest student fundraiser in support of the foundation. And now, to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, I'm going to pass it over to Dan.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Or Rod, appreciate it. I'm very excited to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Jennifer Stevens-Lapsley. She's not only a professor of the physical therapy research at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, but the program director of the Rehabilitation Science PhD program and director of the Restore team, which is a multidisciplinary collaborative research team focused on optimizing movement and quality of life in older adults. She also is the associate director of research for the Geriatric Research Education and Clinical Center within the Eastern VA healthcare system. As a principal investigator, Dr. Stevens-Lapsley has received over $16 million in research funding, and her current areas of research are vast, including skilled nursing facility rehab, telehealth and COVID, rehab for veterans, and joint arthroplasty. For her work with neuromuscular electrical stimulation following total knee arthroplasty, she received the 2007 Marquette Challenge Research Grant. This award led to 2 larger studies funded by the NIH. Without further ado, welcome Dr. Stevens-Lapsley.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your spending some time with us to learn a little bit more about the Marquette Challenge. And I'm here to tell you just a little bit about the value to those that are funded. And there's a variety of different sources of funding, as Jimmy mentioned, whether it's at the level of faculty getting early career research grants or some of our PhD students receiving foundation support. And I'll share a little bit more about each of those. As Daniel mentioned, I am the director of the Restore team, and I'm assuming you can see my slide with a picture of my lab. There it is. So this is the group that runs a lot of my research operations and helps coordinate lots of different moving pieces. We have, for context, we have research assistants, we have PhD students, we have postdoctoral fellows, we have faculty, we have DPT students who are all actively involved in our research. And it takes a village to participate and conduct clinical research. But for context, I didn't start out with a lab this size. I started out as a foundation recipient as a PhD student and got one of the early awards for supporting PhD students. And these awards are really critical for really launching people's careers. I'm going to give you a little bit of context, just a little bit more about kind of the experience I've had as a mentor, but I started in the shoes of these PhD students. I've trained many PhD students since then, and postdoctoral fellows, which are the individuals that seek to get additional training after their PhD studies, and there's foundation support for those individuals as well. And then a number of junior faculty. So these are individuals who are starting their research careers and trying to launch research programs of their own, many of whom have sought funding through the foundation as well. But one of my passions is mentoring our DPT students and really being involved and engaging them in our research operations and giving them a taste of what research is all about. When I think about kind of the success that has led to having the lab that I currently have, I'm very grateful for the support of the foundation, and the awards that these students have received have included the pods and other awards that I've just mentioned. But you can see here, many of our students have been very successful at taking those early awards and then leveraging them. Their success kind of begets additional success, and they leverage those awards in terms of getting additional funding and support through the National Institutes of Health or through other foundations that also link into their research projects. And our students as a whole, through our Rehab Science PhD program, in particular, have really been very productive. As PhD students spend 3 to 4 years training to get their PhD, and
and they are expected to kind of produce and share the products of their work through peer-reviewed publications. And then, when it comes to all the different things that research dollars support, it's everything from, training students to learn to write grants, training junior faculty or giving them exposure to grant writing, critiquing grants, understanding kind of what is involved to write a good grant and review a good grant. We teach students, we have to teach them research design, the fundamental blueprint in order to be successful, everything from data collection and manuscript writing. And so there's quite a bit of in terms of the scope of what PhD students learn and do, as well as all the way up through junior faculty. And I'm privileged to have the opportunity to work with many mentees in a variety of these capacities. But what I really wanted to share with you all in particular was when I first started as a PhD student, these doctoral scholarships, these pod scholarships, and specifically for PhD students, as well as the scholarship that's available for postdoctoral fellows, really made the difference in terms of, as you can appreciate, all the time and the training that it takes to go through a DPT program, and then in addition seek out PhD training, to have some supplementary funds to help with the research or help enhance the training experience, and it was absolutely critical to my eventual success. And so getting that early funding really made a huge difference and gave me the momentum to move to the next level. So after my PhD training postdoctoral fellowship, I did receive, as you saw, the 2007 Marquette Challenge grant. And that, when you first start out as a research scientist, it is very difficult to get a leg up on the competition, right? You're new, you have no track record of funding. You have publications, but you don't have a lot of them. You don't have the reputation that more senior investigators have, but you have a lot of potential in many cases to really hit the ground running with some support from sources like the Foundation for Physical Therapy. And so that early award with that Marquette Challenge grant really instilled more confidence in other funding bodies that I was worth investing in, that my work and the body of work that I was proposing was worth additional resources. And so what you're contributing to in terms of fundraising is absolutely critical for helping launch the careers of some of these junior individuals that then hopefully go on. And in many cases, the foundation has an enormous track record of success with individuals going on to get lots more funding. And at the end of the day, it's about having our profession represented at the table. We want to be at the table for those important discussions. We want to be at the table for those important decisions about the future of healthcare. And the only way we can do that is by having research and evidence to back some of the decisions that are going to benefit and optimize care for our patients. So I will pause there, although I did want to give you one very specific example of the work that I've done. The NMES work that was funded by the Marquette Challenge went on to be included in the clinical practice guidelines for knee replacement surgery and recovery, knee arthroplasty recovery, and is the foundation for future work where we're looking at rolling out neuromuscular electrical stimulation on a much larger scale. So again, just kind of speaking to how one small but yet a very critical piece in terms of early contribution can translate into really changing clinical practice on a much larger scale. I would be more than happy to take questions or comments in the chat. So feel free to enter any questions or comments that you might have. But I really thank each and every one of you for your commitment to raising research funds to help support the foundation of our profession now and down the road. So thank you for all the effort, the time, and the energy that goes into successfully fundraising.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stevens-Lapsley. I appreciate you, educating us on mentorship as well as giving us some of your past. So we're going to open it up for questions now. Like you said, please place your questions in the comments. We'll read them out loud. While people are typing up their questions, I have a couple questions for you. Kind of going off your eSTEM. So going through your curriculum vitae, I saw lots of research on knee arthroplasty, knee OA stuff. I was wondering if you could give us like one big clinical message as students that we can take into clinical practice that you've learned from your research.
Yeah. So are you thinking specifically in that population? Just
Yeah,
kind of a foundation?
sure. Let's do that.
Sure, sure. I guess, you know, a lot of my work has branched into what's called implementation science, which is the translation of practice, you know, findings that we publish into real world practice. It's a relatively new science in the field of science, but it's the way in which we're going to get the knowledge into real world clinical practice. And so maybe one of the biggest take homes is, you know, we published some of our early work many years ago, but we need individuals, we need students to read the literature and help with that translation, in addition to helping support and fund an entire field of science that's going to help speed up the course of that translation. So there's more and more evidence that what we publish is really important, but it sits on a shelf unless you have mechanisms for disseminating it. NMES is a good example for knee arthroplasty. Every year, more and more students in the classes that I teach raise their hands that they have seen it used in that population. And so I think we're making steady progress, but ultimately our goal is to speed up the course of that progress, and be open to really helping push that in the clinical environments that you end up working in, push that particular application or other translational applications that you read in the literature to affect change faster.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That all makes sense. Let's see. The next question from Arlington, Virginia. If someone wanted to start their journey to becoming a researcher like yourself, you know, what would be a good place to start?
Well, you're starting in a good location. I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, so I'm partial to Arlington, and I grew up about a mile away from Marymount, where Jimmy trained. So, but you know, really, the best thing to do as a DPT student is to get involved in some aspect of research with the faculty at the school that you're at. There's no substitute for immersing yourself, even if it's immersion for a few hours a week, in the research process and the data collection and the day-to-day operational elements of research. That really gives you a leg to stand on when it comes to wanting to partner as a clinician with other researchers in a variety of communities that may reach out. So I reach out to clinical teams in the Denver area and across the country all the time asking, hey, would you help us with this particular research study? And the more exposure you've had, the more appreciation you have for things like documenting fully and writing neatly and not missing any fields when you're collecting data. But then that extends, so that's the clinical realm of being involved in research. Mm-hmm. But the other way to get involved is obviously to get more additional training. And that's where the PhD route, you know, having, you know, a PhD in a rehab science discipline and linking that back in terms of the knowledge you gain is certainly one of the more direct paths to get immersed in research. But just taking those first steps. And we often talk to people about, don't look at the whole road in front of you. Take that first step and see if you like it. And if you like it, take the next step and take the next step. You don't have to make a decision about the rest of your career overnight. We do have some resources. We present regularly at CSM about research opportunities and how to get involved in research. And you're welcome to, we have some information on our website as well about PhD training, residency, fellowship training, things like that. But it's a fun world. It's an exciting world because you get to shape the future of the profession.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully that helps people get involved. Let's see. I had another question. So I was reading again through your curriculum vitae, and there's the after program, the effects of finding telehealth and like function in terms of like physical function. I guess my question kind of relating to that is, what do you see telehealth developing into, and like what kind of findings did you guys find in that? As you know, telehealth becomes more prevalent in our society.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You know, we're using telehealth in some of the most medically complex populations out there. Mm-hmm. These are the populations that you as a physical therapist would prefer to be standing next to when you're doing balance exercises and challenging dynamic activities. But we found ways to do those safely and remotely in some of our most frail older adults. Now, the after study focused on patients with COVID. And so those are certainly medically complex for different reasons. We were able to implement things from a distance. You know, the ideal, I think, that's coming out in the literature is this hybrid approach in an ideal world. You evaluate the patient in person. You get to either see their home environment or they come in the clinic. You get to do the manual muscle testing that you want to do. You get to really put your hands on them. And then you send them home and you continue to work with them largely for their convenience and access, making it a little easier to target our rural populations or individuals that have difficulties with mobility that make it difficult to get into our clinics. So in an ideal world, I think that hybrid approach is going to be very effective. But I would encourage people to really keep an open mind and not be afraid to work with some of the more medically complex populations, because it really is possible, even though we prefer to see them hands-on. And all of the after-study work we did and with patients with COVID, as well as all of our work with tele-rehabilitation with medically complex patients, is 100% remote. So it can be done. In an ideal world, I would combine the two, but it absolutely can be done remotely.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know that's a lot of stuff, at least in our classes, we're getting exposed to that. So it's definitely something to see research is coming out on. Let's see, one more last question. I just kind of had a broad open-ended question. If you were to give like advice to either your young self or current students, what kind of words of advice would you give? I know you talked about being involved for research. So maybe something you wish you would have done when you were, just becoming a PT?
Good question. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities along the way. So something that I would have done when I became a PT, I went straight through from our PT program at the University of Delaware with my MPT directly into the PhD program and spent quite a bit of time focused on gaining that additional clinical experience along the way and have really enjoyed that opportunity. So I would say, in terms of advice, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have is kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, not to assume you're not capable of taking that next step, right? And I think as students, you look ahead, you look at your faculty, you think about how much they've done and what they've accomplished, and all of that can be very intimidating. When I think back to where I was and I think to where I am, I'm so grateful for everything, especially the foundation for contributing to that success. But I would have never in a million years thought I'd end up where I am. And so not second guessing yourself, really giving yourself the benefit of the doubt that you are capable and that you will be successful in your chosen path, and just enjoy the journey. But don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to take that step. If you want to do that residency, that fellowship, the PhD, be willing to take that leap of faith and give yourself and believe in yourself, and not look too far down the road.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very inspiring. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens-Lapsley, for showing us you being a great example of how the foundation supports our profession. It's great to see how, your hard work and then our fundraising pairs together and can, make clinically relevant research. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, I can't thank the students enough, because it's really the foundational roots of kind of the energy and the enthusiasm that I've worked with students through this effort for many years, through our institution and sometimes through others. It's really the catalyst that really helps sustain, the fundraising efforts across the board, and seeing your enthusiasm and seeing your willingness to raise money when you're early in your career is really heartwarming for those of us who have benefited from it and want to continue to pay it forward to other trainees down the road. So thank you.
Yeah, so keeping in mind that idea of being the catalyst for making our profession better, I want to share a quote with you all from Helen Keller. It's, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." To me, this really highlights the importance of every single one of your individual efforts towards the challenge. We as students have a really unique opportunity to be a driving force to inspire all of our classmates and all PT and PTA students as a whole to come together in order to better our profession. And then we get to see what happens when we better the profession and how it impacts society when we actually use the evidence-based practice that we find to make life better for our patients. And in the case of Dr. Stevens-Lapsley, we get to see how we make society better by figuring out how to make evidence-based practice happen even quicker and more efficiently. So last year, students across the country came together and raised over $170,000 for the 2021 to 2022 VCU-Marquette Challenge. This year, it's our turn to answer the call to continue the hard work of the years past and to raise even more money. We've all learned a lot over these last few years, especially with COVID and the pandemic, and we look forward to using both in-person and virtual fundraising to support the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research in any way that we can. I'll hand it off to Rod for a few reminders.
Thank you for that, Kate. Thank you for that. So as we prepare to launch into the 2022-2023 VCU-Marquette Challenge, here are a few reminders to help you with your fundraising. You can visit the Marquette Challenge website for more information about the challenge and the foundation it supports. On the website, the Toolkit tab has resources for students and faculty about fundraising, which will include ideas for fundraisers and tips for planning and marketing an event. These resources are especially helpful for those of you who are just getting started, but for those of you who have already planned events, they can help provide a great plan for success. Once you have an idea and a plan in place, social media is one of our greatest resources to spread the word. You can make sure to follow and tag Challenge for PT, and we will be sure to share your events on the Challenge and Foundation social media channels. And then lastly, the deadline for the 2022-2023 VCU-Marquette Challenge is April 26th, 2023, which is a little earlier than previous years. All donations must be received for the foundation by this date. However, we recommend sending in funds as soon as you have them, just to get your school on the list of participating schools. And now to close things out, I will be passing it back to Dan.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'd like to offer one more special thanks to Jimmy Mckay and Dr. Stevens-Lapsley for sharing their connections to the Marquette Challenge and the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. In addition, we'd like to thank our 2022-2023 VCU Marquette Challenge title sponsor, HBSO CNA, for their support. And then for those of you that are new, thank you very much for joining us. And please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have. If you want to set up a meeting, you can go ahead and email us and we can get that set up. Thank you all again. We really appreciate your time and interest in the challenge this year. We hope to see your participation. Thank you.